This is just however many times you've done something, you can expect to get better in correlation to that. And if you're only 20 episodes in, you should not be as good as me. You just shouldn't.
That's not possible for me. See, that's a short-term way to think. No, it's not possible for you to make Lord of the Rings yet. But after 5, 10, 15 movies, a studio might trust you enough to do that.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another very special, as always, weekly NLU live podcast, week number 98. We are talking about this impactful thing that we're going to try to get both sides of, because there's a lot that goes into this topic. Not everything is possible for you yet. So Alan and I's goal, as you know, with NLU is to be heart-driven, but no BS. Now, there's a lot of people out there saying, hey, anything is possible for you. And I used to say the same thing. And most things are possible for you, but there are some things that are holding you back from accomplishing that right now, whether it's time or competence or not having the right people in your corner. There's many different things, but today we want to help you figure out what is possible for you eventually and how to get there.
The thing that's important to first understand before we dive into this topic is that some people don't believe in themselves enough. And then there are some people out there, believe it or not, who sort of believe in themselves too much, almost to a point of delusion. And neither one is good. We call it the drive to 5 for new listeners. You've heard this before. Some people don't believe they're valuable enough, don't believe they're worth much, don't believe they deserve a mentor, or are too afraid to get one. Some people believe they don't even need a mentor. They don't even need to try that hard. They think they'll get there no matter what. And both are kind of wrong. And Kevin and I were talking earlier about finding the optimal point, the drive to 5 when it comes to this. So not everything is possible for you yet. And that doesn't mean it's not possible for you ever. But it also is important to understand that some things might not actually be possible for you specifically because we're all genetically different. We all have certain unique gifts and talents. You've probably heard nature versus nurture. Nature is your genetics and nurture is your upbringing. So a simple example is if you've never skied or snowboarded before and you're in your 50s, you most likely won't win an Olympic gold medal in snowboarding. Why? Because most of the people who are in the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, which are going on right now, are younger and grew up next to a mountain and skied and snowboarded for decades prior to going to the Olympics. So it's important. What we want to do is drive to 5 to the truth. 5 represents the truth. You are probably more capable than you think you are, but if you're delusional in any sense, we want to also dial that in because that's holding you back too, and we don't want to villainize anyone on either end of this. Again, we've all been on either end in different contexts.
And so that speaks to my first point, and I'll just piggyback on what Alan said quickly. There are people out there that right in this moment watching this, while we're talking about this, they're thinking to themselves, number one, I'm not good enough, and number two, I don't think I can actually be better. So that's somebody with low self-worth, low self-esteem, low confidence. They don't believe in a brighter future. But on the opposite end, there are people out there who believe they are already way better than enough. They're way more than enough. And not only do they not need to be better, they don't need to change at all. And what happens is two things happen. If you don't think it's possible for you ever, then you assume it's never going to happen. So you're not even going to start, most likely. If you think it's guaranteed to happen, you're most likely not going to do the required things to get you there, and it's probably not going to happen either. So Alan and I have coached people on both ends. And again, this isn't about making anybody wrong, because I'm sure Alan and I have been on both sides of this. But you have to think, if you are the type of person listening to this right now and you're thinking, I have all these big goals, I have these dreams, I have these things that I want to do, but I don't feel like they're possible for me. I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not fast enough, I'm not a good enough speaker, I don't know business, I don't know money, I don't know numbers, I'm not patient in relationships, whatever it may be. You're already counting yourself out of the race, right? But on the other end, if you're thinking, I don't even have to do anything different, what I'm doing is working clearly, and I am enough, I am worthy, it's all going to happen at the right time, at the right place, that also is misleading you probably down a path that you don't necessarily want to go down. And the problem with both of these is time doesn't help you. a lot of what we're going to be talking about, myself and Alan, today is how time is actually a giant benefit for you if you're doing the right things and if you believe it's possible for you eventually. But one of the key things throughout this entire presentation we're talking about today, this entire topic, is self-awareness. This first point I'm talking about is self-awareness. Do you doubt yourself, or do you think it's going to happen regardless? That piece of information, that belief that you have within yourself, that is going to determine how you should listen to us today, because it's going to be different for every human out there. And I just want to make sure that we start with that.
In a weird way, if you believe that it's not possible without some extenuating circumstances, you're most likely wrong about that. It probably is possible given enough time, enough knowledge, enough skills, enough coaching, enough books, enough action. But if you think it's possible almost no matter what, you're also probably wrong about that. So the first point that I had, so I have a client who her husband is an oral surgeon. And she showed me one time, and she said, Alan, do I have permission to show you this? I want to show you how awesome my husband is. And she was trying to celebrate him, which was a really beautiful thing. But she said, before I show you this is a really traumatic photo. Do I have permission to show you this? Is that okay? She wanted to show me the before and after photograph of someone who, and for anyone out there, just, I don't want this to trigger you, so just a warning. So during the holidays, this person is a surgeon, and a lot of people who try to kill themselves with a gun actually end up blowing off their jaw rather than their brain. So they actually survive a lot of the times. And so she showed me a photograph of a patient that had blown off their jaw. Very traumatic photograph, but the before and after was unbelievable. And the reason why I'm telling you this story is that this person who's an oral surgeon and who went to school for 14 years and who has done all of this incredible work and who has practiced on dummies and practiced with technology, if they had gone to some random brand new surgeon and said, hey, go fix this person's face, that person that's not possible for that person yet. But yet on the other end of that coin, this person has done so many surgeries to work up to this point, and that's the point. It's super, super important to realize that, again, not everything is possible for you yet. If they had asked this person to do this for their very first surgery, reconstruct someone's face right out of the gate. So, for example, for me, if someone said, hey, please reconstruct this person's face, I couldn't do that. I've never done it before. I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't go to school for 14 years for this. No idea. Versus this other person has done this many, many, many times incrementally over time to get to the point where they can do it, and not only do it, but they can do it with mastery. They can do it really well. And so again, what's possible for you today is very drastically different than what's possible for you in a decade. And it's really important to understand that. Maybe you can't write a book right now and finish it by the end of this week. But don't make the mistake of thinking, I can't write a book. No. You can't write a book right now with a deadline by the end of this week. But if you were given 5 years, there's no question you could write a book. Of course you could. Really, really important. Kev, I'm just going to go and check on Tucker real quick, and I'll be right back.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
So my second point connects to what Alan said. I was on a podcast last week, and it's weird because when Alan and I get introduced on podcasts, usually the hosts do a lot of research and they say Kevin has hosted 900 episodes and they're listened to in 120 countries and multi-six figures and all that happy jazz. And while I appreciate that, while I'm grateful for that, I always try to make it a point to tell the host as well as the audience that this is not where I started. Okay, I didn't start with all these things. This has taken years and years and years and years. So I was on a podcast, like I said, and at the end, this person, his name was Hamish, great podcaster, great human being. At the end, I said, hey, I just want to tell you, you're really crushing it. This was a great interview. These were amazing questions. I go on a lot of shows, and I really, really, really enjoyed this. And I said, I want you also to realize that if you think this was impressive or you enjoyed this or any of that, you have to understand that it's just the reps. If you were talking to me 5 years ago, you invited me on your podcast 5 years ago, you would have already hung up the phone. We wouldn't be here because I didn't have that much value to add. It's because of the reps. So my second point, don't compare yourself to someone else. Compare to their reps. This gets difficult because a lot of us don't see the reps, especially if you're comparing to somebody else on social media. When Alan and I are on stage, it's because of the reps that we're even remotely good. Alan's done over 1,000 coaching calls. We've done 900 podcast episodes. You can't compare to somebody else's result. You have to compare to their reps. One of my main focuses is telling people that. Telling people that, look, this is just practice. This is just however many times you've done something, you can expect to get better in correlation to that. And if you're only 20 episodes in, you should not be as good as me. You just shouldn't. And if you are, then you're going to be world class. So that's great too. But you have to focus on the last rep, and you have to focus on this rep. And then you have to focus on the next rep. And it's just that forever. It really is a numbers game. And this is really where having a growth mindset comes into effect. There's a book by Carol Dweck, Mindset, great book. But a lot of people don't have that. And if you're, like I said in my first point, if you're somebody who doesn't believe you're good enough, if you don't believe you're worthy, if you don't believe it's ever going to happen, you have a fixed mindset. So that is the first thing to change, and then really start to think about this. The most successful people, the most successful performers, the most successful business people, podcasters, speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs, writers, they probably just have way more reps than you. And you didn't see them in the beginning because nobody did. Nobody, Alan, it's funny, we're about to cross 900, and I saw Gary Vee posted a video today of him and his Wine Library TV. And he said, honestly, nobody gave an F about me for the first 900 and something episodes. Now here he is however many years later, and he's Gary Vee. You have to understand that it's the reps. It's the reps. And that's one of the reasons I really admire and enjoy Gary, because he always talks about that. So don't compare yourself to somebody else and somebody else's result. Compare, if you're going to the reps, to the preparation, to the journey, to the way that they actually got there, not where they are.
So Tucker is okay, just so everyone's aware.
He was screaming.
He was going. That was unusual. Okay, so there's a quote in Atomic Habits where James Clear is talking about Steve Martin's journey. Steve Martin wrote a book called Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. And Steve Martin talks about his career openly and honestly in this book, saying, it took me 10 years of learning, 4 years of refining, and then 4 years of being a wild success. So if you don't know who Steve Martin is one of the most successful comedians in the world. But for 14 years, no one knew who he was. And so this overnight success thing, just understand, to Kevin's point, you're not going to be the best comedian out of the gate. Neither was Steve Martin. Neither was Chris Rock. Neither was Ron White or whoever. It's definitely about the reps. And so when you start out your coaching career, or you start out as an entrepreneur, or you start out in finance, or you start out in fitness, this expectation that you're supposed to be good up front is so interesting to me. So Emilia and I just launched a podcast called the Conscious Couples Podcast. And it was so different this time than when Kevin and I started our podcasts way back. So I'm going to take you back on the journey a little bit. I have a new desk, so I keep shaking the camera. Okay. So I had a podcast called Conversations Change Lives, and Kevin was the first guest on that show. Kevin invited me onto his show, the Hyperconscious Podcast, and then eventually we started talking deep stuff. The Hyperconscious Podcast was about becoming acutely aware of who you are and deep conversations with deep people. Conversations Change Lives was about the same thing. They were both about self-improvement. So he had me as his first guest, I had him as my first guest, and then eventually we partnered up and we started doing the Hyperconscious Podcast meets Conversations Change Lives podcast, which is a terrible name, so eventually we went all in on the Hyperconscious Podcast. And for those of you who are new listeners or viewers, we didn't rebrand to Next Level University until, 450 episodes or something like that? Yeah,
something like that.
And so here we are, Next Level University, and we've had more listens in the last year than the previous 4. And so most of our listeners are new listeners who don't even know Hyperconscious Podcast existed. They never will know what that even means, except for if you're listening to the story.
It's a shame. You missed out on some gems. For sure.
Yeah, for sure. Especially the first episode, where Kevin may or may not have swore in the intro.
Yes.
So This second time launching another show was so interesting to me because Emilia and I are both already podcasters. We both have reps under our belt, 1,000 coaching calls, 200 speeches, 700 team huddles, 950 podcasts between our show and other shows. Plus, so our first episode was, in my opinion, really good, but that's because we already have all these other episodes. I was on a podcast recently, and I asked her, I said, is this your first podcast? Because she was too good, in my opinion, at podcasting for that to be her first show, because the show that I was on is called Born Unbreakable. And as a matter of fact, we repurposed that episode. But I knew, I was like, there's no way this is her first podcast. She's too good at this. So why am I saying all of this? To second Kevin's point, you need to stop thinking you're going to be good out of the gate. You have to get rid of that. No one is good out of the gate. The people that you admire, the people that you listen to, the people that you watch are hundreds, if not thousands of reps in. I calculated this out because I was curious. Kevin goes to the gym 5 days a week on average since he was 16 years old. It comes out to almost 4,500 gym sessions because he's 33 now, or almost 33.
32, 33 in August. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. 33 in August. So that's 4,500 if you take the 33 years minus 16, and then you do 5 days a week on average, 52 weeks a year. I calculated this out in, I think it was group coaching or book club. I think it was book club. And I said, so if Kevin's in better shape than you, don't think that he's inherently in better shape than you. He's just been working out since he was 16. So when I see him squat with really good form with 300 pounds, I shouldn't look at myself and go, oh, how come I'm not good at squatting? No, he's been squatting since he was 16. So it's really important. Again, not everything is possible for you yet. It wasn't always possible for Kevin to squat 315. At one point, he was only squatting 145 or probably just the bar even. So it's really important not to to understand that at the beginning of a journey, if you have high expectations for results, it's going to jeff you in the long run because everybody starts out in the same place. They're always a beginner. Everyone starts out as a beginner.
Alan, I have a question I was going to ask you before you ran away. So when you start with somebody coaching, right? When you start coaching versus, I don't know, just say like 6 months in, how do their goals change? Because I think goals have such it's such a big part of this overall topic, because when you start doing something, you probably reset your goals. And I think when you stay in the pool long enough, you reset your goals long enough to realize, oh, you know what? That first goal is achievable, and then rinse and repeat. So how does that progress? How does somebody's goals progress when they're working with you, and why?
The size of someone's goals is predicated on the amount they believe in themselves. And so, Kev, I'll use you as an example. When we first started working together, your financial goal was, I think your true north goal was just to make 6 figures as a podcast. Then eventually it was 2 million. Then I think you bumped it to 70 million for your net worth. And then eventually it was in the 150 range. And then I think now you believe it's possible to be a billionaire, which it is possible, right? And so same as you, that's the way it is with my clients as well. As people start to do the little things well, and they do them consistently over time, they believe in themselves more and more and more. One thing that I learned early on in coaching is that you're not going to build belief unless you decide to do something in advance. So for example, Kev, you tell the story about how in baseball, you didn't decide to go get good at baseball. You just were quote unquote good at baseball. Again, that's fixed mindset versus growth mindset versus a version of you that said, oh, I'm going to go be an all-star in baseball. Rather than just ending up really athletic and what you refer to as reckless and just ending up really good at shortstop and hitting a baseball versus someone who decides I want to be the best I can possibly be at baseball, the person who decided in advance is going to build belief when they make it true. So deciding in advance to get an A in a class and then going and proving to yourself that you can do that builds belief. And to answer your original question about goals, once the belief is higher, the goals get higher. And so if a client is succeeding in my program, they always have higher goals later than they do now. One of my clients is looking at Brene Brown level impact now because she now knows that statistically speaking and numbers wise, that's not only doable, but probable if she stays on this momentum.
Hello, this is Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and we are well into 2022. And maybe you are not willing to have a repeat of the last 2 years. Or perhaps you've had an inkling for quite some time that you are destined for something greater than what you're experiencing in your reality right now. Maybe it's your business or your work, and you know that there's greater value and impact that you can have in your community. Or maybe it's love and connection that's been eluding you. Or perhaps it's your health and wellness, and you know that you can feel better, do better than this. Well, join us at Next Level Live, March 26th, a full-day immersion with experts in their fields to help guide you on how to bring your life to the next level. Looking forward to seeing you there.
I said the same thing to a client the other day. I said, I didn't expect to have a podcast thing. That wasn't a podcast company. That wasn't part of it. When I started, that wasn't possible for me. That's exactly what I said. It wasn't possible for me at the beginning because I didn't know what I know now. So my goals have changed as my awareness has changed too. And it's interesting you mentioned baseball because I was going to bring this up as a point. My mom and grandmother always say you should have kept playing baseball because you'd be on TV and all that. I don't believe that. I think they're just very kind and they love me, so they say nice things. I don't think I was good enough to be a professional by any stretch of the imagination. But one of the reasons I got out of baseball, and again, I don't think I would have been in the pros, but I remember telling my mom and my grandmother that I didn't want to travel as much as they did. I used to want to be a professional wrestler when I was young. And I remember thinking, I don't want to be on the road all the time. That's not what I want. I want to be able to be home with my family. I remember thinking that. I've had that thought since I was young, and now we're blessed because we can do things virtually. Obviously, there'll be some travel, but not like baseball. You can't really play baseball virtually. I don't think there's a market for that yet. But you have to understand that your ability to accomplish something is directly connected to your beliefs around that. Okay, so think of it this way. I had somebody I was talking to recently who said, hey, I want to be the next Gary Vee. Gary Vee is getting a lot of love. And I said, all right, cool. I'm not exactly sure what that's going to take, but let's check in. Okay, why do you want to do that? Well, I want to have a ton of impact. All right, awesome. Why else? Well, the money would be nice. Okay, awesome. What else? Because I feel like I can help people. Okay, awesome. What else? We go down the list. And I said, all right, what are some of your core values, your core beliefs, your core aspirations, what are some of the things that you really want out of life? And this person said, oh, I can't wait to walk my kids to the bus stop. And I was like, okay, I love to get home at a certain time and spend time with my significant other. Okay. I like to have some consistency around my schedule. Okay. So this person and I had this talk of, look, if you want to have Gary Vee level impact, a Gary Vee level life, some of these things are actually holding you back a ton. Some of these things that you think you really want. It's like trying to climb Mount Everest with a cinder block on your back. Climbing Mount Everest is hard enough. With a cinder block, it's almost impossible. It's like becoming a professional swimmer and being afraid of the water. If your core beliefs aren't in alignment with what you want, not only is it not possible for you yet, but you might not get the result and not know why. And I think that's a very important thing for you out there. Check in with why you're doing what you're doing. Because if there's any interference, if there's any resistance from any of your thoughts, you're probably not going to accomplish that goal. After this person and I talked, they changed their mind and you said, honestly, I think I was inspired by the things I've been watching and I think that's what I thought I wanted, but I really want to make sure that I'm home for my family and I want to have that kind of life. That's awesome. That one shift changed the way this person went about their life, and now they can accomplish what they really, really want when honestly they probably would not have accomplished that other thing even with enough time.
So again, one of the things that I wanted to bring up today is fairly complex, but if you aren't driving, write this down. There are 5 types of value that all humans have, and they're different though. And I remember I told one of my clients this, and she's like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So the first one and the most important one, I think, is your intrinsic value. If you're a human being, you have intrinsic human value, and that's what people are referring to when they say you are enough just the way you are. because it's this weird duality. You are enough just the way you are, but you're also not enough yet to be a professional athlete. You see how that's a weird duality? Intrinsically, you're enough. But Kevin just admitted, you know what? I don't know if I was really good enough to be a professional baseball player. But intrinsically, he is enough. So the first one is intrinsic value. Your intrinsic value is the part that I think people are talking to when they say you are good enough just how you are. The second part is primary value. Primary value is the fire in your heart. So it's why you do what you do. So if your family is in a burning building, you'd run in there like that. But if you have to go in there for $100, you wouldn't do it, of course, right? So why you're doing what you're doing, and there's a whole rabbit hole of how deep we can go into each subfacet of these 5 facets. But the second one is primary value, why you do what you do, your purpose, your calling, your mission, what motivates you, what drives you. Okay, third one is passive value. Passive value, a good example of this is Peter Jackson directed The Lord of the Rings back in the early 2000s, and those movies have proliferated throughout the world, and Emilia and I are watching them right now. So that's an example of passive value. This is your body of work. So Kevin and I, this episode will be repurposed on the internet and on our podcast, and that's passive value. In other words, we can be impacting people's lives in a positive way while we sleep. So that's passive value. Okay, so far you've got intrinsic value, you've got primary value, you've got passive value. The fourth one, write this down, it's active value. Active value is your current capabilities. It is what I am doing right now in real time. This is live, so this is my active value. I'm adding value right now. Now, the fifth one, and most important in some marketplaces in a business context, is your perceived value. It's unfortunate that this is the case, but I want to teach you this. I was told by one of our team members who's from Italy, shout out to Alessandro, he said, Alan, when you use Tom Brady as an example, no one knows what you're talking about from Italy. And so we're listened to in 120 countries, and I want to be cognizant of the examples that I use, because in Italy, apparently no one knows who Tom Brady is. In New England, Massachusetts, which is where we are in the U.S., of course everyone knows who Tom Brady is. He spent a long time on the Patriots, which is the most famous NFL team in this area, New England. So, perceived value. If Tom Brady goes and gives a speech on American football in Italy, he's going to have 2,000 people in that room who don't know why he's there, who don't care about what he's saying, who don't even know who he is. Tom Brady's value intrinsically didn't change. His speaking abilities didn't change. His body of work and all the film and the new documentary out on him, none of that changed. But yet no one cares. Why? Because no one cares about American football in Italy. You see how his value is so contextual? So again, not everything is possible for you yet. Let me give you a tangible example. Okay, so those are the 5 different types of value. Intrinsically, we all have the same value. Then there's primary, passive, active, and perceived. Peter Jackson, I'm going to go back to The Lord of the Rings. Peter Jackson is a film director. For those of you who don't know, he directed the Lord of the Rings films and also The Hobbits later. After the Lord of the Rings films came out and they were so successful because they were filmed in New Zealand, they were beautiful cinematic masterpieces. Peter Jackson had no problem getting a studio to pay him hundreds of millions of dollars for his next film. He had a track record. His body of work, Lord of the Rings, allowed him to make something possible that wasn't possible prior. So if Peter Jackson made the mistake at the beginning of his directing career of, making a $100 million movie, that's not possible for me. No. It's not possible for you yet. Of course you can do that later, after you prove yourself, after you convince the studio to make a smaller movie. And then maybe a $20 million movie, then maybe a $50 million movie, then maybe $100 million. After The Lord of the Rings, any studio will give Peter Jackson what's referred to as final cut. Final cut just means no matter what you make, we're going to produce it. So final cut is something that only certain directors get, because a lot of times early directors, the producers come back and are like, the studio is like, no, we got to slice that, we got to slice that, we got to slice that. So my point is this. If Peter Jackson made the mistake that many of us make, which is, that's not possible for me. See, that's a short-term way to think. No, it's not possible for you to make Lord of the Rings yet. But after 5, 10, 15 movies, a studio might trust you enough to do that. And they filmed all those movies all at the same time too, which is even cooler. But now Peter Jackson can make any movie he wants, where at one point that wasn't possible.
Alan has talked a lot about his snowboarding credentials. My snowboarding credentials are not quite that high. I remember when I was younger, probably too young to be snowboarding, honestly. I had one of those plastic ones, Alan, that you just stick your feet in. There's no boots, there's no binding, none of that. You just stick your feet in and you pray for the best. And I was bombing down this hill and I hit a jump that was bigger than I was. And I remember when I was in the air, it was like a scene from a movie, and I was like, this is not great because I don't know where my body is and I don't know what to do with it. And I remember I landed on my head and I split my lip open and I had a chunk of my inner lip hanging in my mouth and it was disgusting. But I always think about that when I'm snowboarding. So Tarryn and I went away 2 weekends ago, last weekend, and I was thinking to myself, there was a couple kids next to us and they were going to the park that has all the jumps and it has all the tricks. And I was thinking, there is 0% chance I could ever do that. There is 0% chance you would catch me dead in the, what is it called? Stunt park? Whatever it's called.
Oh, terrain park.
Yeah, there's 0% chance you're ever going to catch me in that. And I just let that kind of slip my mind, okay? That exited my mind. And I was talking to somebody last week, and they said, it's awesome that you're a speaker. I could never get on stage and speak in front of people. And I said, you know what's funny? I couldn't either until 5 years ago. And that snowboard thing came back into my mind. If I ever want to hit another jump, which is actually possible, but it's not possible for me right now in this moment, I have to let go of the story that I've been telling myself. If this person I talk to ever wants to speak on stage, which they can, maybe they can't right now, but they can, it's not impossible for them forever, they have to change the story that they're telling themselves. It's like if you fall off a bike when you're 5 years old and you convince yourself every year for the rest of your life that you can't ride a bike, it's going to seem impossible. Swimming's the same, snowboarding, skiing, whatever it may be. So really, really check in with the stories that you're telling yourself, because we see people doing things all the time. And I think a lot of us, for our natural reaction is, I can never do that. I can never do that. I'm not good enough. I'm not this. I'm not this. When realistically, a lot of that is just your conditioning. It's something that happened to you 10, 15, 20 years ago, and it's a story that you're telling yourself. And then on the opposite end, there's people out there telling the story to themselves that they're already good enough. So throughout this entire thing, keep checking in with that. Which part hits you? Which part resonates with you? And which part do you think would benefit you the most to adopt from a mindset perspective?
Yeah, do you think you're already good enough by default, or are you not giving yourself enough credit for what's possible in the future? Kev,
I thought I was good enough. I thought I was good enough, Alan, to hit the jump, and then I cracked my face.
How did that go? Well,
no. What were we going to say?
I'm just joking, man. One thing that I think is fascinating too, we talk about fail forward. You made me think of this when you're talking about snowboarding. I have fallen snowboarding so much.
Of course.
But that's also why I now can go into the terrain park and do some of that stuff, right? You're not going to try a 360 and then just get it your first time. If that's the case, you should try a 540. That's a whole nother conversation. Kev, can you give us an example? Because you and I are definitely heavy on the people that are on the low end of Drive to 5 not believing in themselves enough. Can you give an example of the opposite and how maybe a level set of delusion would be helpful?
I remember, and I've told this story before, but I think it's the most impactful one. We had somebody who kind of called Alan and I out about some things in group coaching, and we had a rumble over it. And I remember talking to this person behind the scenes, and they said, Kev, I'm doing everything right. I can already see myself on stage in front of thousands of people. Everything's going to work out. I know it is. I know I'm doing the right things. And I remember saying, look, nothing is going to change for you until you do. You have to start taking things more seriously. I know you think it's all going to happen by default, and I love that. I think that self-belief is awesome, and I appreciate the fact that you feel guided by the universe or whatever it is you believe in. I love that. That's amazing. But honestly, you're going to end up very disappointed in your future if something doesn't shift. I can tell you, this person was a podcaster as well, I can tell you from my perspective, from my experience, and from what is perceived as our success, that if we only showed up when we felt like it or we felt called, we would not be where we are today. take that advice or leave it, but I can tell you that you will not be as successful as you want to unless you start creating some more grit around your productive habits. Very difficult, terribly difficult conversation to have. But if you're doubting yourself, you need somebody to put air under your wings, air into your sails. You need somebody to say, hey, you're way better than you realize. You can do this. You just have to keep showing up. When somebody is quote unquote delusional, it means that they assume it's just going to happen by itself. And the problem is there's other people saying that too. There's other people telling this person that you just have to keep doing what you're doing. Just be yourself. You're already enough. Intrinsically, yes, you are already enough. But if you're not doing the right things in the external world, you're not going to be able to make the shifts necessary to accomplish what you want. So as important it is to lift somebody up, it's also important to challenge somebody who might have a little bit of delusion, because they might start taking different actions that will get them different results. Difficult, but oftentimes necessary.
Super hard, but not everybody wins. It's important to understand that. I think that some people want to believe that everything can work out for everybody all the time, but that's based on real merit. It's based on work ethic. It's based on virtue. It's based on quality of content. It's based on skills and abilities, and it's important to understand that. And so I just thank you, Kev, for that. I appreciate you. So the next point, this is about some things are impossible now, genuinely, but might become possible later. I'm going to give you a tangible example. In 2012, I looked this up, and I also knew this from a book that I was reading recently, but it was mind-blowing to look this up. Instagram sold to Facebook for $1 billion in 2012, and they had 12 employees. Now, the point that I want to make here is that a $1 billion company back 50 years ago, it's not possible to have a $1 billion company with only 12 employees, because that was before the internet. So do you see how saying, oh, not everything is possible for me yet? No, it wasn't possible for Michael Jordan to make $10 million playing basketball if he was born 150 years ago. Why? Because there was no marketplace for basketball players back then. John Wooden, one of the earliest college basketball players and coaches, one of the most successful UCLA coaches in history, one of the most successful college basketball coaches in history, never made even close to the same amount as some of the coaches make now, even assistant coaches, because there was no marketplace. So some of the esports people out there who do pro gaming, that didn't exist 40 years ago. Why? Because there was no internet. There was no Xbox. So if you're making decisions today about yourself, oh, I'm not good enough, or I can't do that, that might change. Jeff Bezos in his garage selling books, going to investors for $20,000 for 5% equity, and the investors saying, what's the internet? They said, no, we will not give you $20,000 for 5% equity, which, by the way, now Amazon's worth $800 billion, so that's $16 billion. I did the calculation. So the point that I'm making here is that what if you're making decisions today that are what I refer to as global decisions? What if you're making decisions like, I can't skate, or I suck at math, or I suck at English? I used to have that. I used to say I suck at English. I'm going to write a book. I am writing a book. I used to suck at English. That doesn't mean I can't write a book. So there's a big difference between I can't write in this moment because it's not currently possible, and again, I can't forever. But we have to be careful, because when you say I can't, it might not be possible yet, but it might be very possible soon. I just heard that Airbnb is about to have more locations than the biggest hotel chain on the planet. And that wasn't, they have like way less employees. I'm pretty sure the biggest hotel chain, don't quote me on this, but I think it's like 50,000 employees or something like that. And Airbnb has like, I don't know, probably like 5,000. See, that's not possible before the internet. That's not possible before Uber and Snapchat and the interconnected economy. We have a 14-person virtual team. That wasn't actually possible 40 years ago. 40 years ago, we'd all have to travel every day to see each other. Right now, what Kevin and I are doing right now wasn't actually possible 40 years ago. This camera didn't exist. This iPhone didn't exist. The internet didn't exist. Zoom didn't exist. StreamYard didn't exist. This laptop I'm using didn't exist. So just understand, what if you're making decisions today based on what's possible today versus what could be possible later? You have to be very, very careful about that.
Boom. Next level nation, when you have self-belief and you are disciplined enough to fear chase on a consistent basis, that is a whole nother thing that can shape your life. That has worked for me. I know that's worked for Amy, and I know that's worked for Alan, as well as all of the rest of the Next Level team. Join us March 26th for Next Level live in Worcester, Massachusetts. Half day, 4 speakers. It's only $97 for a ticket. We already paid for parking. Go to the parking garage, take the elevator up, and you will be at the Next Level place with Next Level humans. And if you're afraid, do it anyway. If you're unsure, do it anyway. If you're uncertain, do it anyway. This is something that you will not regret, because you're going to prove to yourself that you are capable of doing more than you currently are, and that's a wonderful thing. And it's wonderful to get outside of your comfort zone, because you realize what you're afraid of is not going to harm you. Oftentimes, it will help you.
So we have graduated 5 groups. We're about to graduate our 5th, I should say, from group coaching. And one thing that I can say for certain is that every single person who's done group coaching ends up more consistent than they used to be. So if you're out there and you wanted 2022 to be different, but you're not keeping the promises you make to yourself, that's hurting your self-worth. It's hurting your self-esteem. It's hurting your self-belief. If you don't feel like you have discipline enough to do the things you don't want to do, don't feel like doing, but you know are what's best for you, group coaching will help you do that. Imagine being on a team of 10 people where everyone's goal is to help each other be accountable, not to pick on each other, but to be on a team with this. So if you listen to this show, you will inherently fit in this group. Ambitious Army, Gratitude with Attitude, Tribe of Abundance, Legacy by Design, and Pursuit of Excellence. All 5 groups have these awesome names, awesome teams. You start out with 6 habits. You eventually go to 9 a day, eventually 12 a day. But it's an incremental process. If that sounds overwhelming, trust me, it sounded that way to the other people as well. Reach out to Kevin or myself, or go to nextleveluniverse.com. I'm pretty sure Amy put a comment as well, if you're watching this live, in the chat, or you can click the link in the show notes. We will actually send you the Instagram handles of people who have graduated from group coaching, so you can ask them, what was your experience? What was it like? Were you intimidated? Were you scared? Did Alan make you feel bad? I'm joking. The answer is no. Anyone who did group coaching, I believe, is grateful they did it. And we are so confident in that we will put you in touch with people who have graduated.